The United States has highlighted the impunity of the government and weak administration of justice in Turkey in its annual human rights report, criticizing the Turkish government for interfering with the freedom of expression and assembly as well as inadequately protecting minorities. Following a 3-month delay, the country reports on human rights practices were presented by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry on Thursday and Assistant Secretary Tom Malinowski, who described 2014 as a tough year for human rights around the world. The report on Turkey noted that the judiciary and law enforcement agencies in the country are politicized, giving the appearance of impropriety and bias. It recalled that the government reassigned thousands of police and prosecutors in response to a corruption investigation they were conducting into a number of senior government officials and their families, and that the prosecutors who initiated the investigation had been suspended. It added that the Turkish government closed the investigation and destroyed evidence that was gathered, and that many police officers involved in the investigation were accused publicly of a conspiracy to overthrow the government. 2 elections, a local and a presidential poll, followed twin investigations that targeted the inner circle of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who repeatedly characterized the corruption scandal as a plot to topple him and hence gain an upper hand in both elections. The report also criticized Turkish authorities for failing to fully prosecute members of the police for the excessive force that led to dozens of deaths and scores of injuries among demonstrators in 2013 and 2014. The State Department also mentioned the reshuffling of members of the judiciary in favor of the government, claiming that the executive branch took greater control over the bodies responsible for judicial appointments and discipline. The report criticized the government for creating a new set of courts, the penal courts of peace, in which single judges wield extraordinary power and to which it assigned politically sensitive cases, which had a chilling effect on potential future investigations into politically connected individuals. Erdogan publicly acknowledged that the courts were particularly established to fight against the Gulen movement, which Erdogan claims orchestrated the corruption investigations to oust him. The Gulen movement, also known as Hizmet, is a civil society organization inspired by Turkish Islamic scholar Fethullah Gulen. Leading figures in the movement have denied the government's allegations. The penal courts of peace have become a mechanism enabling authorities to imprison critics and launch investigations of political cases. The report noted the wide leeway granted to prosecutors and judges, which contributed to inconsistent court verdicts. Turkish authorities applied the broad anti-terror law extensively with little transparency and continued to engage in arbitrary arrests, hold detainees for lengthy and indefinite periods and conduct extended trials. The Human Rights Report also said the Turkish Penal Code and its anti-terror law retain multiple articles that restrict freedom of expression, the press, and the Internet. The report put the number of jailed journalists at 7. It said self-censorship was common because journalists feared that criticizing the government could prompt reprisals, adding that the government vilified and prosecuted individuals sympathetic to some religious, political, and cultural viewpoints. The report stated that the new legislation gave the state expanded authorities to block Internet sites without judicial oversight. In his introduction to the report, Malinowski specially mentioned Turkey for blocking access to Twitter and YouTube in the lead-up to elections. The Human Rights Report recalled that the authorities detained more than 20 members of the media in raids that appeared to target media outlets openly critical of the government. Those detained included Zaman chief editor Ekrem Dumanel and Samanyolu Media Group head Hidayet Karaka, the report said. The report also mentioned this reporter, who was deported from Turkey in February last year for sharing tweets that were critical of then Prime Minister Erdogan. Regarding minorities, the State Department said the government did not effectively protect vulnerable populations from societal abuse, discrimination, and violence. Kurds continued to face human rights problems, particularly limitations on freedom of assembly. Roma, women, children, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, LGBT, individuals were also subject to discrimination and abuse. Violence against women, including so-called honor killings, remained a significant problem and child marriage persisted. Other problems during the year, the report added, included poor prison conditions, including overcrowding, restrictions on religious freedom, government restrictions on human rights organizations, and a rise in the expression of anti-Semitic sentiments by political leaders and pro-government media outlets. The government took limited steps to investigate, prosecute, and punish members of the security forces and other officials who were accused of human rights abuses. Impunity was a problem, the report underlined.